Well, hi, and thanks for checking out Basic Folk, a podcast where we have honest conversations with folk musicians on the Bluegrass Situation Podcast Network. I'm the host, Cindy House, and it's so lovely to have you here. Let's talk about a couple things before we get into our guest today, Tami Neilson. If you would like to stay in touch with us, we would love it for you to sign up for our monthly newsletter. You can do that at basicfolk.com. Follow us on social media at basicfolkpod. If you have been listening for a while or this is your first time listening to Basic Folk, we're a listener-supported podcast. You can make a financial contribution by going to basicfolk.com/donate. You will get a monthly bonus episode that lives backstage on our website, and you gain access to that by giving at least $5 a month or $60 for the entire year. There is a link in the show notes you can check out, but you can go to basicfolk.com/donate. Okay, let's talk about Tami Neilson. We go track by track on the Canadian-born, New Zealand feminist troublemaker and country music superstar Tami Neilson's fifth album, Kingmaker. Recorded at Neil Finn's Roundhead Studios, the songs of Kingmaker expose industry systems, exploding patriarchal structures of the industry, society, and family. It's definitely not new territory for Tami. Her previous two albums called attention to misogyny and patriarchal structures. However, Tami digs into these themes with sophistication, grace, emotion, and humor. The way she brings these important messages to life hits you hard, but also you can dance to it. This is Tami's second appearance on the podcast. She was first on episode 79. Definitely check out our first conversation as we talk about her life in her family band, move to New Zealand, and her relationship to fashion and appearance. She also got into experiencing the death of her father, the musician Ron Neilson. He appears on the new album Kingmaker in several forms. For instance, on the song Beyond the Stars, written with Delaney Davidson, Tami sings about the loss of her father and the longing to be with him again, with legendary Willie Nelson singing the part of Tami's dad. Tami is one in a million. Enjoy this conversation and her brilliant new album as we go track by track on the album Kingmaker on Basic Folk. Tami, my queen.
Cindy, my minion.
Oh my gosh, I've never been more happy. You are of First Nation descent, and when we last spoke, you had just connected with your cousin Peggy, who you were talking about was the first female chief of, can you help me with the name of this island?
Well, it's, Manitoulin Island.
Manitoulin Island in Ontario, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what is the latest with you connecting with your Ojibwe heritage?
Well, we spoke a few times throughout lockdown, I think, because that's like the last time I spoke to you was kind of in the midst of lockdowns. And of course, I haven't been able to get home since then. You know, our borders have been closed up until just a couple months ago. And so I'm just about to head next month. I'm heading over to Ontario for a tour. So I'm hoping that at some point I'm going to be able to sneak up and see her at some point and actually meet her in person after all this time. So yeah, I feel like our conversations, you know, when you're like, we talked about this 2 years ago, but it's still exactly the same because, you know, it's like time has stood still for, you know, a lot of us. But yeah, so I'm looking forward to getting home and obviously seeing all my family and getting to explore that a little bit further.
So in preparation for this interview, I went back and listened to our first interview. And if anyone hasn't heard that, it's a must listen. We go over all of Tami's history, her connection with her father and her brothers and growing up on the roads. And this interview, we're going to focus on your new album, Kingmaker, which is your fifth record. Which was recorded at Neil Finn's Roundhead Studio, which I'm not sure if he was there or if you have met him, but I really would like to give you the opportunity to talk about how amazing Neil Finn is.
Neil is awesome. And yes, he was there because, as I said, We weren't in lockdown yet. We were in between lockdowns. We finished the album a week before we went into like a 4-month lockdown. So it was very fortuitous timing. But it's been kind of a crazy time, and I think it would be the same, around the world. A lot of our artists, especially in New Zealand, we spend most of our time touring overseas, and we're out of the country because everything's so far away. You got to make a big go of it when you do. And so normally Neil is gone a lot of the time, but he and Sharon actually live above the studios in this beautiful...
He lives above the store.
Yes, he is Kim's convenience, basically. So yeah, he's like... He and Sharon live above in this beautiful old building that they've converted into Roundhead Studios, one of the best, if not the best studio in New Zealand. And they happened to be home because everyone was home because of the pandemic. And it was really, I've gotten to play with Neil, and, he's obviously a legend everywhere, but he's particularly a huge legend in New Zealand. But he's very involved in the music community here, and very down to earth and approachable, as most Kiwis are. So I was over the moon to have him kind of popping in and out. I'd see him in the morning going for his coffee, or, he'd pop in and listen to songs and come and go. And he came it was very cute. He kind of came up to me quite shyly and said, "Would you mind if Sharon and I, the day that the strings are recording and you're doing all the orchestral stuff, would you mind if we sat in and listened? Like, that's just so special to be able to sit in and listen to that." I'm like, "Are you asking me right now?"
Oh my
so
God.
Cute. But it was really encouraging and special to have him just popping in and out every once in a while, because he'd pop in and listen and then kind of drop a word of encouragement and then leave again, and this was the first time that I had taken the helm solely as the producer. Normally I co-produce all my albums with others, and so this was the first time. It was quite daunting to kind of, especially with it being a much bigger album sonically than I'd ever done. And so having him pop in and say really encouraging things meant more to me than I think he realized, It was really, encouraging.
No, producing on your own, I'm wondering, because, I just had a conversation with an artist on Basic Folk recently about, the fear of pain, or the anticipation, it being a lot scarier or more painful than the actual event, so if you were if you had that kind of experience of in trying to prepare for this album, you were psyching yourself up, versus what was it actually like when you got in there?
Yeah, that is so true. That is so true. I often feel like I waste so much time worrying about things that never eventuate, and I'm like, God, I could have saved myself so much heartache and sleep. I could have gotten so much more sleep. But yeah, it was definitely daunting, but it was also exciting at the same time. So it was, I think the excitement took over the fear, and but there were definitely lots of butterflies. But then once I was in the studio, I think any good producer knows they're only as good as the team that they've assembled. Really, your job is not to be this grandmaster controlling things. It's enlisting the people that you trust and that are going to deliver what you're kind of holding inside your head. They're going to bring it to life. And so having my band, having Victoria Kelly, who did all of the orchestral arrangements. She is one of my dear friends, one of my favorite people, and she is a genius, award-winning composer, which helps, and also does a lot of Neil Finn's work. So she's a bit of a legend as well. So I knew I was in wonderful hands with her. Simon Gooding, who engineered the album, he is a master as well. So I was surrounded by a team that I completely trusted, that I knew if I wanted feedback, they would, give it in a way that was really kind, and they all want what's best for the album as well. And so, yeah, that put me at ease. As soon as we were in that environment, it was like, oh yeah, like it's just having like all my mates like supporting me.
Yeah. That's so cool. Okay, let's go track by track through Kingmaker.
Cage shaker, bottle of my lightning, sold for a dime. If my famine made your feast, then I'll stop begging for what's
So Kingmaker, the opening track on the album, where you are a woman and you're calling yourself a king. I love that. I love like calling women kings or like calling women gods, like using male words to describe, women and non-men. Like I just like love that so much. How did you like come into that practice, and what are your thoughts on a woman calling herself a king?
I think that, unfortunately, it's still a very bold and almost controversial thing to do, which it really shouldn't be, coming from having Indigenous heritage, being in a country, New Zealand, where the Indigenous peoples, the First Nation people here, are such an integral part of everyday life, and their culture permeates this country. It is not unusual at all for females to be the chief or the leader, and so it's not a radical concept, but in white Western culture, it definitely is. So I think it was kind of stepping into that power and realizing that you can hold that space. And it's taken a very, very long time to kind of come to that confidence, that the song itself is a journey. It kind of is a snapshot of that journey of, in the beginning, kind of talking about waiting and waiting for this kingmaker to grant you an opportunity or give you his blessing, which are kind of, symbolizing the gatekeepers, particularly, in my industry, but as women in general in this world, And so, that's kind of showing how I've felt for a very large part of my life. And then it's this kind of slow realization, like in the next verse, and saying, well, hold on, like my famine made your feast. Like, you don't hold the power. Your power is borrowed from me. And kind of that dawning realization, and then the last line being that I'm already a king after all. Like, all this time, I've been waiting for you to bestow, like, these crumbs. And coming to the realization, oh my God, like, all this time I've held this power, and I control my destiny. And that song definitely captures my personal journey as a musician, but as a woman in this world.
And I've always been a king after all. A careless woman, she played too rough, she laughed too loud, she talked too much, too much, too much. She just too much. I wanna be her when I grow up.
The next song is Careless Woman, and at the time that we're recording this, you've just released the song and the video, and I am all riled up. You said this song was inspired by dating tips from a 1938 article in Parade magazine. One of the tips was careless women never appeal to gentlemen, don't talk while dancing. So I actually found some of this article online, and while reading it, I had like a really crazy, like visceral reaction where I felt like these old tendencies of mine were like firing up, like don't show any affection or emotion towards your escort or whoever you're with. Like don't get them to talk about emotional things. Don't talk about things that he's not interested in. Don't drink too much. Like basically don't take up space. So like going back and looking over that, and I found it on a blog post, and they're like, ha ha ha, isn't this funny? But it also seems like baggage that women still carry around in 2022. So much of that stuff I could relate to in terms of my family of origin, which I'm curious about you because your family sounds so different than mine, treating you like an equal, being so supportive in different ways than mine was. But what's your reaction to that experience of being able to still see that baggage existing today?
Yeah, reading that article, I had a very visceral response as well. I immediately, like, it was immediate. I was sitting at my computer and I read it on the computer, and I literally stood up from my chair, put on my voice memo on my phone, and started stomping and clapping and singing this song. It was like an immediate reaction to that. And the song comes across, I guess it can be seen as like tongue-in-cheek, but there's not a lot of joking in that song. It's sarcasm and it's anger, and it's also taking up that space, and it's rebellious, and empowering. And the first thing I thought of were my grandmothers who lived in this 24/7, and then thinking of that effect on my mother and how it's so deeply embedded, and then her effect on me, how it's so embedded in every one of us, and people are like, oh, that's like 80 years ago now or whatever, and it's like that generational thread is still so strong in all of us, and society has not changed that much. As much as people kind of laugh about what's said, it may not be said that way anymore, but it's been internalized for generations. Yeah.
I wanna be her when I grow up. I wanna be her when I grow up. When they look at you, they see a lover. Tongue of fire, dark velvet hands, existing for their pleasure, waiting their command. When they look at you, they see a mother.
The next song is Baby You're a Gun, which I kind of have. First of all, I want to say that I completely agree with you and that my views totally align with yours. But I kind of want to have like a little bit of a nuanced conversation about like a certain aspect of this song I took away. So Baby You're a Gun is a song about the underestimation of women and the roles society expects them to play. And you were inspired while reading Dolly Parton's autobiography, and she says, many an old boy has found out too late that I look like a woman but think like a man. It's a great mistake to assume that because I look soft, I do business that way. So I completely agree, but I kind of want to like flip this on its head a little bit. I feel like I've encountered women in my life that kind of act like men and have found success professionally, but it seems like, and I like could be completely wrong, but it seems like they have like a weird relationship with other women. And I was wondering if you agree, or if we could talk about that. I don't know if you watch Grey's Anatomy or not, but there's a character, Dr. Bailey, who I get that vibe from. But what do you think?
Yeah, there is definitely, and I know many of these women who have internalized misogyny so much and have been so harmed by it that their way of battling it or dealing with it is to become one of the boys and be seen as a non-threat. And therefore, it allows them to move in the same circles, but a lot of it can be to the detriment of the women around them. And I know a lot of music managers like this, or, women who have had to be in the music industry since, the 80s and 90s. And you can see that in them. You can see what they've had to battle to get to where they are. And at the time, that was the only way they could see forward. It's starting to change now, but you see it in I remember having a conversation with a particular music manager who was, kind of scoffing about the Me Too movement as a woman and saying, when I was at this big label, I used to walk in, it was all men, and I'd just bang the board table and the looks on their faces, and you just go in and you do, you just do it kind of thing. And it really saddened me to hear that. Because she's fallen victim to misogyny almost without even realizing it. So that's a very dangerous position to be in. I don't put Dolly in that category. I think she's surrounded by women as well in her life, and uses her platform to uplift other women as well. And equally, like, people in the rainbow community, and surrounds herself with the rainbow community, which is very interesting to me. So it's, but yes, I totally know what you mean. There are definitely, and it tends to be a specific generation of women, and I can completely understand why. That was their only tool in their kit of surviving.
I remember being in my early 20s working at like a good old boys news station where I was like the only woman in the production studio, and like the sports guy would come in to the studio and he like wouldn't even look at me until the day I used the C word in front of him, and he was like he was like, oh, okay, we can like talk now. But I remember thinking like after a while, like, and this is all kind of subconscious of just being like, I don't want to act like that. But yeah, I feel like now it's great to be able to have a choice of whether or not you want to go down that road or not. Yeah.
But it's still definitely, I mean, it's not to say things have changed that much. Again, it becomes a choice, knowing that you're going to be you're going to be deemed as the problem or the problematic one, and coming to terms with like being fine with that.
Yeah, totally.
Got me some cows and I got me some chickens. Got me a dog and a guitar for picking fights with folks who try to cut the string on my kite. That's right.
Next song is King of Country Music. It's your autobiography and story in music form, opening for Kitty Wells, touring, slipping demo tapes in laundry bags of stars. This is a song about truly earning your place in the industry. The amount of confidence you exude regularly is stunning and inspiring to me. For you, how difficult is it to maintain your confidence on the regular and channel it to the point where it comes out so strongly in your songs?
It's definitely a mindful choice. It's not something that comes naturally. I mean, there's an element of confidence, and there's a foundation of confidence I have that was instilled in me by my parents and in the way I was raised and in my career because of the things I've achieved and the level of skill that I've worked on, but as a human being, as a woman, you have to give yourself a lot of pep talks and treat yourself the way you would a girlfriend, or a loved one, and speak to yourself when you start getting all that internalized worry or imposter syndrome or any of those lovely things that we all battle with. You really have to be mindful of what's in your mind and what comes out of your mouth, because that's what starts becoming the way you view yourself. It's also surrounding yourself with people that are positive and encouraging, and people that model for you, oh wow, like she's doing that, she's saying that, she's wearing that, and she's still standing, like, like any woman who is boldly taking up space and holding that space. I try to surround myself with women like that, whether it be in person or in my feed on social media. You quickly become whatever goes in comes out.
The daughter, not the son. Could the king of country music be the daughter, not the son? Last night I woke from a dream, you and me were together.
The next song, oh man, it's Beyond the Stars, which was written by you and Delaney Davidson about the loss of both your fathers and the longing to be with them again. And you said after you recorded the song, you cried for 3 days. And Willie Nelson is also singing on this song with you. You posted this striking video of your reaction to hearing Beyond the Stars for the first time, which reminds me of I've talked about this a lot about this video. It just reminds me of the best of humanity. It's just so pure and so emotional and so real. So now that some time has passed and you maybe are crying a little less, even though I'm kind of crying right now thinking of that video, how did this song change your relationship with your grief?
Oh, wow. This song, grief is this crazy beast. It's associated with pain, obviously, and loss and missing. And that has been the experience of grief and continues to be, depending on the day and the time and what happens. But this experience has it's kind of turned into something really beautiful as well, and something I treasure. And because that, it keeps me close to my dad. So having, there were a lot of layers going into that crying, it was pure bliss and joy, hearing Willie's voice, being the voice of my dad in a song, and thinking about how my dad would react to that. That was what got me, that was the thing that made me cry for 3 days, was wishing he was here to share that with him tangibly. But of course it wouldn't have happened if he was here. That song wouldn't have been written. Willie wouldn't have had to be his voice. It could have been my dad's voice, all those things. So that
so layered.
Yeah, that realization that the loss is what brought this blessing, and so that was a whole layer. And then of course just it being Willie Nelson and what he's meant in my life and to my music and to my family's music. We performed his song Uncloudy Day at the end of every one of our shows growing up. And I always thought it was a traditional gospel song, written hundreds of years ago. Yeah, right? And, and I remember, having that conversation with him, saying how I never realized, he was a part of my life his words coming out of my mouth, like, for decades. And just that whole, like, even down to the smallest thing, like, when we first started putting out albums as a family and we first got distributed into shops, you know, like, I'd run into a store, I'd look for the country section, and then I'd look for the Willie Nelson section, because we were always behind him because of the alphabetical order. So he was always, like, my true north. Like, look for Willie Nelson and you'll find me. You know? Like, quite literally. And the meaning of this song has grown and grown, you know? Like, I flew to Texas to perform the song with him live on his ranch in March. And just days before, he lost his beloved sister Bobby. And, you know, she has been, for 50 years, she's been, like, his right-hand man, you know? And she is the one playing on all those classic albums. And the way that Trigger is a voice on his albums, her piano is a voice on his album, you know, like, just like his own voice. And I couldn't imagine that loss, but I also can, because, you know, I work closely with my brother and tour with him, and growing up in a family band, I understand, like, that deep family connection of performing together. And Lucas said to me, you know, Dad's been playing that on loop, like, to the point where I'm like, is he okay? Like, does he remember he's listened to this 50 billion times? Like, he's just been listening to it on loop. He had played it for Bobby, and she loved it, and it became then this connection for the two of them, and that kind of added this entire other layer of how it feels sacred. It feels really sacred to be part of that, his grieving process as well. And unbeknownst to him, that when he recorded it, that it would become that for him. And lots of heavy but also sacred and beautiful layers.
South Carolina in the summertime, and there's holes in both her Sunday shoes. The heat of the asphalt quivers like the people dancing while she's singing the blues.
The next song, Green Peaches, which is a Southern Gothic tale about the exploitation of young and vulnerable women by men in power. In the wake of an expose of sexual harassment in the local New Zealand music community, you wanted to write about a story that is unfortunately all too common. And I'm reading this, also I forgot to mention, there's a really well-written track by track that I had access to, so that's where I'm getting all of these notes. But the metaphor for Green Peaches seems really powerful. Can you talk about that idea of green peaches and why that is the metaphor you chose to use?
Yeah, I have a peach tree right outside my window in my lounge, or in our living room. Kiwis call it a lounge. I'm bilingual. But where I do a lot of my writing, and it never tends to, like, fruit to really beautiful peaches because the birds get to it too quickly, but often has these, like, hard little green peaches that are so beautiful. And so I think that, you know, helped me find a metaphor, I think, subliminally, looking at that while I was writing it.
Sure.
But I am friends with the women and non-binary people that came forward. You know, New Zealand is a very small country. We've got 5 million people in the whole country. And then you boil down the music industry and it's a very, very small circle. And so when all this happened, it wasn't kind of this abstract thing like, oh, it happened in the music industry, you know, which is no shock to anyone. But it was people that we all knew. The victims were people the survivors were all people that we all knew. And the perpetrators were people that we all knew very well. And it was more than just, you know, I get people saying, oh, your music's political. And it's like, you might see it that way because the only people who think it's political are people who have not lived this experience. It's a very personal experience. And so these women, it's hard to talk about this without crying. You know, these women are beautiful, beautiful young women and non-binary people, you know, and the best of us, and so love music and so love this industry and just want to be artists and amazing songwriters, and to have this continually get in the way of that. Every one of them has dropped out of the industry or stepped back from it. Some have left the country to try to heal from it. And it you know, when people talk to me about when they kind of want to get into a battle of, it's just because there aren't as many women. That's why there isn't equality in the music industry. There aren't as many women. Mm-hmm. And that's such an ignorant thing for, you know, when you know what I know, that women get knocked out of the game before they even get to the starting line by bullshit like this. Green beaches.
Well, he flies with the vultures and he cries cancel culture anytime you try to call him out. He storms, he rages like manners are contagious. Honey, turn the volume down. Mama's talking.
The next song is Mama's Talking, which was assigned to you by Annie D'Angelo, Willie's wife. Sounds like. It was right after Kamala famously said the words, "I'm speaking," while Mike Pence interrupted during a debate. And you and Annie were talking about your experience with a guy who was repeatedly interrupting you and blocking you from talking to someone. I have been noticing recently, and I was like going on a streak for like, in 1 week it happened to me 3 times, that certain men do not listen to me when I am giving them instructions on how to do something that I am fully 100% more informed about than they are. So I thank you for giving us the song where I can send them. I can send them the song when it happens again. But seriously, in reality, when you find yourself in a situation like that, how do you handle it? And how did writing this song maybe change your approach in reality?
God, handling it in the moment, as you say, is a very different thing. Now I will spontaneously burst into this song. So that's sorted.
Problem solved.
Yeah,
Next.
you know, it's like having responses that you like copy and paste, you know, that'll be this song.
Copy and paste, yeah. a draft template in Gmail.
Yeah, this song is a draft template for all of us who are interrupted. I guess I tend to, at the time this happened, the particular incident that inspired the song, I think you're just in shock in the moment, you know? And
doesn't it leave you breathless? It takes your breath away.
It does. The rudeness of it is just astounding to me. It's physical, It feels like someone's like pushed you or kicked you in the stomach or something. And at the time, I remember my brother was with me. He was kind of standing off to the side, doing something else and kind of watching this.
This is Jay.
My brother Jay, yeah. He was kind of watching this exchange. And I walked away, and he was just shaking his head. And I'm like, is it just me, or like, did that just happen? He goes, oh, it happened. Because there's always that, you know, again, it's embedded in us as women, like, to second guess and go, oh, I mean, that's classic gaslighting. Oh, is it me? Am I taking it too personally? Am I overly emotional about this? You know, that's always kind of our go-to, our default. So having him watch the whole thing and go, no, that's what happened. And it was like gross to watch. Yeah. And so in those situations now, I guess I try to be more mindful when things like that happen. It's really hard not to be taken by surprise. And, you know, again, like we said, it's a physical thing. It's like being caught in this moment that we've all had those moments where something's said that's inappropriate, and then 2 minutes later you're like, damn it, I should have said this, but it's too late, the moment's passed, or even 20 seconds later. And I guess I tend to now, when those things happen, just sit quietly and wait for them to finish, and then resume exactly the sentence I was interrupted. So almost like you've just talked over me, like what I said didn't exist, and now I will do that to you.
Your memory takes me by surprise. I can't go on each day and night so long when I think I've moved on.
All of these songs are very special, Tami, but this is a very special song. It's I Can Forget. You found a tape of your dad, the musician Ron Neilson, who died 7 years ago. This had an unfinished song on it. You finished it up and wrote the lyrics for I Can Forget, which is a song about being caught unexpectedly by grief. So I don't know how often this happens for you, to come across unfinished songs by Ron Neilson, but can you talk about how you feel when you find something like that from your dad?
The first time it happened was with a song called Lonely on my Don't Be Afraid album. And that was like immediately in the wake of his death. And it's kind of crazy, whenever I'm going to write an album, there tends to be like all of a sudden this unearthed song tends to turn up, and or an idea or a melody or a demo of his, and which is kind of crazy because, like, growing up in a musical family, I thought I knew all of my dad's songs and even his bits that he was working on, you know, like it. And so it's kind of crazy to find these little treasures. And the way it normally happens is through my brother Jay. In this instance, my mom was doing a clean out of her storage space, and there was a box of old demo work tapes. So this would have been quite old for it to be tapes instead of, you know, voice memos and digital. And she gave the box to Jay and said, you know, if you want any of these, like, have a listen or whatever. And so Jay went through and dug out his old tape recorder and was having a listen through and found this snippet of, it was just music and melody and a very different tempo and kind of style to what we ended up using. But when he sends these, it's like, it feels like finding a note from him tucked in a drawer that I've never read. Like, that's what it feels like. I remember the week after he died, I was going through helping Mom clean out some of the house and drawers, and I opened his bedside drawer, and there was this journal and I didn't even remember giving this to him. It was like a father-daughter journal, and I was like, I was a teenager when I gave it to him, like early teens. And it was do you remember the song Butterfly Kisses by Bob Carlyle came out? It was like this huge,
oh yeah,
like one hit wonder, right? And it was a journal. I think it was called Butterfly Kisses, and it was like a father-daughter journal that came out at the time.
Oh my God, in the throes of adolescence.
Yes. And so I had filled out my side and given it to him for like probably Father's Day or something. And it was, appropriately embarrassing, like, really, really, really cheesy. Like so bad. So bad. But of course I'd given it to him unfilled on his side. And so I opened the book, and there he had filled out his side, and I'd never seen it, and I'd never read it, and it was like...
Jackpot.
Oh my God. Yeah, I just immediately start sobbing. And that's how it feels every time I find, or my brother gives me this kind of
it feels like a butterfly
song.
kiss.
It does. Stop it, Cindy.
To faraway shores, fighting for a better life.
The next song is The Grudge, which is inspired by the true story of your great-grandfather disowning your grandfather who married outside of his faith. It explores patterns of behavior learned and passed down through family lines and making the choice to break the chain and put a stop to passing those grudges on to your own children. I feel like the first step in that process is actually recognizing the patterns before you can work on breaking them. What has been your experience of identifying those patterns in your family and in yourself?
Not a fun one, I can tell you that much right now.
Oh, it's delightful. I get balloons, I get cake.
Yes, I loved every minute of it. Yeah, this, it's a painful process. I think we all grow up. I think all of us as, children, our parents are larger than life. They're superhuman, right? And then as you become an adult and a parent yourself, you start realizing the way that you are learning and growing as you parent. Like at first you're just a kid that doesn't know what the hell they're doing. And realizing, there's some grace there. They didn't know what the hell they were doing either. And they were just learning and growing with us. We're almost all kids growing together. They're just an older version,
Yeah. They're just an older version of a kid that knows how to drive.
Pretty much. And has the power to buy stuff, and they have money in their wallet. Yeah. Hopefully, sometimes they do. But yeah, it's really unsettling to see your parents as people. Like, you know what I mean? Then that sounds horrible and selfish, but I think that as kids, that's how we hold our parents. Like, they're not like us. They're like this upper echelon. They're the management, and realizing things are way more precarious than we ever realized, and that they were only ever equipped with the tools given them by their parents, which is terrifying. Because they had no tools.
Those tools are old and rusty and also asbestos.
Yes. Chain smoking tools. Alcoholic tools. Yeah, all those lovely things. And so kind of that realization, I think, digging into my grandparents' stories, it gave me this whole understanding and grace for my parents. And seeing them as children, seeing my parents as children, and the tools they were given, and the job that they did with what they had. I think that is a healing thing to realize. as your inner kid. And you hope to God that your kids will have that same grace for you, and the mistakes I will definitely make and am already probably definitely making. So yeah, it's a painful process, but I think finding those little pockets of grace and forgiveness is really important. And that song, I normally wouldn't even probably go there, but this time in history has brought so much up for all of us. You know, it's such a divisive time. I often say, you know, there's the statistics of physical deaths and physical illnesses in a pandemic, but what they don't have the statistics for are how many relationships have died and or been broken, or trust and the things that have been broken in this time, the grudges that are being held, and that will be held for decades to come because of this time, whether it be the politics of what's happening, you know, to vaccinate or not to vaccinate, mask or not mask, like everything is so divided, and there's no room for grace a lot of the time. And so that was kind of me processing that in this song.
Holding nothing. You want me to cook you dinner, but it ain't my job. You're telling me that I should be thinner, but it ain't my job.
The last song in the album, Ain't My Job, it's about breaking free from social contracts you never signed and laughing in the face of expectations society puts on women. There's a lot of messages that you are delivering in this song, seemingly to your partner or a partner, about making dinner, being thinner, which is a very good rhyme. And I feel like, I mean, I'm making an assumption here, Tami, but I feel like this is not your husband that you are talking to directly. And this might be obvious, but when you have a good partnership, this is, again, a very obvious question. Where do you get inspiration for songs like this, where it sounds like you're talking to a bad spouse? And then also, like, this is not in a belittling way, but how does your husband like these type of Tami songs?
You know what? I think it doesn't faze him in the least, because he knows it's not about him. If anything, he cooks dinner way more than I do. The character that I often am singing to and referencing in my songs is misogyny. And that can come from a man or a woman. And our society and patriarchy, you know, the whole kind of system, the broken system which we function under. And so that misogyny is a character in my songs. And whether that's embodied by a partner or a boss or a colleague, a family member, anyone, you know, and I think that we can all relate to that. Anyone who's trying to oppress you or kind of place their rules and expectations on you. So that's, you know, when I think Grant knows that that's definitely who I'm singing to and not to him. And it's so funny because my kids are like part of the Ain't My Job, you know, they're singing in that. They're singing with me in the chorus for King of Country Music, singing God is in the garden, devil's in the dirt, you know. So those are my boys singing on all of these songs, and they totally
fighting the patriarchy.
Fighting it, man. They know that it's definitely not their dad, but it was quite funny. My 7-year-old, when he first heard Ain't My Job, and the first line saying, "You want me to cook you dinner, but it ain't my job," he looked at me and he's like, "But it is your job to cook my dinner." And I said, Well, it is for a little while, but not for long, buddy. So enjoy it while it lasts.
Yeah. Definitely.
And you're the only one whose job it is for me to cook your dinner.
Yeah.
But yeah, they often say, they'll listen to the words. They listen, or they ask me, whether it be my song or any song, and they say, "What's this song about, Mommy? What are they saying?" And so you tell them, and when I first played them some of these songs, my 9-year-old he said, "I really like these feminist songs."
Oh my God, give this woman a trophy.
Right. My job's done. But yeah, because they said, when they're like, "I don't understand. Why, what do you mean, like 20 cents less on every dollar?" And I'm like, and I explained about equal, the disparity in pay for women. And of course, as children, they're just like, "What? That's not fair." It's just so black and white to them. Like, that's not fair. Like, how come this person isn't getting paid as much as this person? It's just unbelievable to them. And I want them to maintain that, And when they first asked me, like, "What's a feminist?" I said, "Someone who believes that women should be treated this equally as men." "Oh, well, I guess I'm a feminist." I said, "Sounds like you are." That's good.
Love it. Oh, doing the Lord's work. Before we go, do you have time for a quick lightning round?
Sure.
Okay, here we go. Tami, what is a song that makes you cry every time?
Beyond the Stars. I can only think of that because we just talked about it.
We will accept this answer.
No, actually, Emmett Till by Emmylou Harris. Can't listen to that.
Who is your guitar hero?
It's hard to choose. Brittany Howard, Amethyst Kia, Sister Rosetta, Bonnie Raitt. I have to, those are, I can't just pick one.
What is your favorite scented candle?
I'm a sucker for anything like coconut. Yeah.
That's a good one.
Yeah, it's like it immediately makes you feel like you're on holiday.
Hell yeah, it does. Who do you unabashedly stan?
Unabashedly Dolly and Mavis.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay. What is one product you cannot live without?
My liquid eyeliner. I told you I would not be wearing makeup today, and look, I woke up and
Full
I'm like,
face.
I still need my liquid eyeliner.
Okay, this is the last question. I know that you're going to Canada soon, but where else would you want to go once travel restrictions are lifted?
For destination, first thing I'm planning is Nashville. Yeah.
Oh, man.
That's always my go-to.
That needs to happen.
The home away from home.
Tami, thank you so much for talking to me. I was so excited to reconnect with you again. This album is so great. Congratulations. And thanks for making such important, great music.
Oh, thanks, Cindy. You're always, honestly, the best interview. You always kill me with your questions. I'm always like, I gotta be on my toes.
Yeah. Drink 2 cups of coffee.
Yeah.
Also, I do want to say Tami Neilson is a member of Basic Folk, and honestly, your support of the podcast, when your contribution rolled in, I was bowled over. So I really appreciate it. Thank you.
You're doing the Lord's work, girl.
This episode of Basic Folk was produced by John Nungesser. Alex Stanton composes our music. Basic Folk is on the Bluegrass Situation Podcast Network. You can find all of our episodes there, wherever you get podcasts. You can search for Basic Folk on the SiriusXM app, or you can check out our website, basicfolk.com. Thank you so much for checking it out and listening all the way to the end. We'll talk to you next time. Bye.